Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Foreclosure Deals Coach podcast. I am your host, Donnie Corum, and the Foreclosure Deals Coach. And this is the show we help investors just like you to find, figure, fund, fix, and flip a foreclosure deal. In this crazy market that we're dealing with right now, there are some things you just can't predict. And this is one of those things that there's no way I could have predicted that there was going to be a whole system in place where workers are going to be getting deported continually. We're losing construction workers on a relatively regular basis right now. It's a lot of stuff happening. We're going to discuss that on today's show. Stay tuned. Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Foreclosure Deals Coach podcast. Once again, this is Donnie Corum, your host. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's hop right in today. We talked about the 5 stages of real estate investing: find, figure, fund, fix, and flip. Obviously, one of the bigger parts of this is the fix stage, getting the property from the foreclosure condition that we buy it in, where we typically get a great discount on the home. We buy it much below market because it needs work, right? And so we're able to buy that property, spend money to fix it up, and then get the property back to market where we're selling it at retail. Well, obviously, with the slower interest rates and downturn of the market and all the stuff we've been discussing almost over and over again for the past couple of years, a lot of people have been nervous about, can you get the property sold? As if that wasn't a big enough problem. Now we're facing the fact that with the current legislation in place, Trump and the entire system is deporting a lot of illegal immigrants from the country. Now, personally, I'm a fan. My wife is an immigrant from Romania, right? And she immigrated to this country properly. She went through the process. It took her several years to get through it. So I'm a big fan of the melting pot the United States of America has become. But a lot of people do come to this country illegally, and they hang out here and they work. And not all of them are bad people. I think when you see on the news, there's a lot of talk about people who are not good for the country. But I think most immigrants are generally good people looking to make a good life for their family in the land of opportunity that is the United States of America. However, a lot of migrant workers come here, and what we have found is that we can get better work at lower prices than we can get dealing with American citizens. Now, this kind of makes sense, right? If you're an American citizen here, you're paying taxes in this system, you got the healthcare costs, you got all the expenses living here. Whereas if you're an illegal immigrant, you may not be paying a lot of the things that it takes to live here. So as a result, a lot of illegal immigrants come here with a great deal of skills, and they work for much less than their American counterparts. And this has created a dynamic where we generally look for immigrant workers to do some of the basic labor, because we have found that the quality and the price tends to be less expensive than the American counterparts. As a result, we become very reliant on immigrant workers to get our work done on these fix and flips. Well, recently, with a lot of the push in the government to reduce illegal immigrants in the country, we've had situations where we started a job. This is a real world situation we're working in right now. We got a property that we're working on in the Arizona market right now. Things were going great. Everything was functioning. Life was fine. And then one day, crickets, just absolute disappearance. And what was weird about this, because we've had construction crews walk off the job before for a wealth of reasons. Maybe they weren't happy with the working condition. They found a better paying job. There's a series of reasons why we lose construction. But in this case, the tools were still on site. The materials were still on site. They didn't take anything. They had just kind of vaporized out of the blue. So we figured, only rational thing is that they'd quit the job. Tried to reach out to the construction foreman to talk to them about why they would quit the job so suddenly, and couldn't get hold of anybody for weeks. Well, talking to some people who are more acclimated to the Arizona market, somebody suggested, well, maybe they were deported. And, looking into it, ICE had been around in the neighborhood neighborhood recently, and ICE is circulating all over Arizona right now, arresting people, taking them back across the border, and et cetera, which is their job. They're just doing what they're being paid to do. But suddenly we're finding ourselves in a bind. How do we get these projects completed in absence of the migrant workers that we're so reliant on to get the work done? And as a small flipping operation, we're reliant on it, but we're not alone in that. Okay, at every level of construction, you're going to find a certain percentage of migrant inexpensive labor as part of that job because it's built into the cost quotient that we're not paying the high dollar rates for everything in the project, because simply the labor that we would pay, especially at the higher cost of living, leading to higher wages and et cetera, makes some of these jobs just basically impossible to complete with the higher expensive workers. So that's a crazy thing to deal with. But for the last 3 weeks now, we have been scrambling to find new workers for this project with the belief system that perhaps the crew was suddenly deported out of the country. So what is a business to do if they're reliant on migrant workers, right, like we are, and then suddenly those workers are deported by current policy at the government level? Well, it's a tough problem to face, and a lot of investors are coming to me now going, well, what happens, if my crews get deported? Well, the obvious solution would be to hire documented workers, right? If you can find guys who can maintain the pricing that you need and stay in, and not have the potential of being deported because they're already citizens, or they're here on a work visa, or they're here properly, then there's less concerns there. But that's the reality. Is right now you've got to look for a higher quality worker, and that's going to mean that you're going to have to spend a little bit more to get the work done in this market, which of course means budgeting for higher labor costs on the deal. Now that sounds like a bad thing, but the reality of the current marketplace, because things are so depressed right now, is that we are buying deals, whereas a normal spread on a deal, I'd be super happy normally with $120,000, $130,000 gross spread. Then we would subtract the rehab cost, call it $50,000 to $60,000 in rehab, leaving 50 to 60 in profit on that deal. And then you got your transaction costs, your agent commissions, your cost of funds with the hard money lender, et cetera, leaving a tiny 25 to 30K profit, even if we're spending 50 to 60K in the remodel. Okay. However, in this market, we are finding the gap between what we're buying it at and what we're selling it at is actually wider than it's been in some time. And I'll give you an example. We went under contract this very week on a property that my client is getting for $565,000. Okay. And they're going to put 60, well, we would have budgeted 60 for the remodel, and normally, right, because it's not a tough remodel, it's only 1,500 square feet. But because we have this migrant worker thing, we're now budgeting 65 to 70 on this deal. But the net, the return on this on the resale side is about 750 grand. So we're starting with a nearly $200,000 spread on this deal, right, to end up at a potential profit on this after factoring in a little bit higher labor. So we got 190,000 in spread, let's say. We spend 70,000 in the remodel, so we're down to 120,000, right? We then have to factor in same thing, cost of funds, et cetera, and we are left with about a 60 to 70K potential profit on this deal, which is much higher than the 25 to 30K that we're normally looking for in a deal. Now, we spent a little bit more to get there, right? Instead of the typical 50 to 60,000 down, we're going to be spending closer to $100,000 on the down payment. So more money out of pocket, but because of the increased risk, there's a potential for increased reward. The bottom line is there's a bunch of sliding scales as you're doing this real estate investing thing, okay? You're going to have times where it's very easy to find bunts, basic deals where we can make $15,000 to $20,000 to $25,000 without breaking a sweat. You're going to find other times where you can make 50 to 60K. I remember when we were in the 2020 to 21 era and the rates were so low that you could sneeze and sell a property, where we were easily making way more than our target 25K profit, easily hitting 40 to 50K on most deals, and then selling them for more than our desired asking price because there was such a low amount of inventory on the market at the time. So that was a time when things slanted in our direction. And believe it or not, guys, Right now, despite the slowness in the retail market, the ability to buy a property at a much lower price than normal, it is unheard of to be able to buy a house with a retail of $750,000 for $560,000. Normally, we would not even contemplate that. But in this market, it's happening quite often. We still have to battle the fact that we got to deal with this migrant worker thing, right? And we have to work a little bit harder to find the right construction crews, and we'll likely have to spend a little bit more on the labor component of the construction to hire the right workers to get this done. But as long as the spread is there and the growth spreads are wider than normal, it all kind of balances out the wash. So when people ask me, when is the best time to invest in real estate? The answer is always right now. You see, you just have to buy differently when the market shifts. Right now, there's a problem, and the problem is finding the right labor forces to do the work. The solution is spending a little bit more on labor to accomplish that objective, and accepting that because it's a little depressed, we're not going to be selling it for as high as we would normally sell the property for, because the market's not throwing off as much on the retail side as it has, because interest rates are high and there are less buyers in the market. All of these things are in a constant state of shift, guys. Okay, so where we are now is not where we're going to be 6 months from now, which is not where we're going to be 6 months from that point. You have to be able to adapt what the market is doing right now. Isn't that the case in any investing strategy, right? If you know that oil is likely to go up in the future due to whatever's happening in the oil market, you invest in oil based on a future that you believe oil is going to go up. If we believe the market is going to trade down in the next 6 months, we trade based on that. The same applies to real estate. As long as you're buying based on the future, what the real estate market should do, you're in a great spot to make money. But if you're just kind of absolutely buying deals, as so many investors do when they're first getting started out, they're so eager to buy their first deal. They're buying anything where it looks like it pencils out without speculating a little bit on the trend the market is going to follow in every aspect of our 5-step system. When we find deals today, like I mentioned earlier, we're looking for a much wider gap than we're typically looking for, and that's really affected the wholesale market. A lot of wholesalers are trying to place deals that where the spreads used to be more than sufficient to bait investors into the deals. But in today's market, when we find deals, we're very clear, hey, listen, we're not even going to have this conversation unless we're at 125 to 150K in gross spread from purchase price to sale, and that generally means moving up to a higher price bracket for the investors who are buying in the market today. This is not necessarily bad news if you got the added liquidity that you need to do a higher end deal. Whereas we were buying deals at $300,000 or less, now we're looking at $400,000 or even $500,000 on the deal, because we know that today you have got to find more spread in order to get the deal done. That's just the nature of a sliding scale market. Our analysis has to reflect a future that's a little less certain, and a future that we believe that the rates are going to come down in the next fourth quarter. They're talking about 2 rate meetings in September, both of which are slated based on the analysis that really predicts with relative accuracy what the Fed is going to do. I think we're running like a 60 to 70% chance right now that the rates are going to be coming down starting in September. So with that in mind, that's going to bake into the mortgage market over time. It doesn't happen instantly. We don't see rates come down at the Fed level and then suddenly mortgages are immediately cheaper, but we do see that it trickles into the market a few months later, which leads us to believe that if they start dropping rates now, that by the time we get to late in fourth quarter and early first quarter of 2026, we should have lower rates, hopefully below 6, maybe even mid 5s. I don't want to oversell this because we don't know, but we believe that rates are going to start to trickle down. And if we can get to below 6%, we're going to see a big influx of buyers into the market. Listen, the demand for real estate on the retail side never really goes away. People have to buy homes for a variety of reasons. They're upgrading because they've had a family change, right? They're downgrading because they've had people move out of their home, they're retiring, etc. The real estate market always retains a certain liquidity. What does change is the buying power of the retail buyer. And with rates as high as they are, coupled with the fact that houses went way up between 2020 and 2024, we saw a huge increase in prices over that time period. It became logical logical that the buying power had to come down if interest rates are high. Well, that's where we are now. The buying power of the average retail buyer is much lower than it's been in a long time. They call that affordability. Housing affordability is at all-time lows. We haven't seen a status in the market where people have been less able to buy the home they want to buy in many, many years because interest rates are high and prices are high. Well, prices have started to settle down a little bit. They've come down in certain markets 10 to even 20%. We've seen in certain parts of the Scottsdale market. And now interest rates are starting to come down. So we know that that combination is going to lead to more activity in the market. By the way, good morning, S2 Intelligent Adaptive Systems. Thanks for checking out the show today. Much appreciated. And if you'd like to comment, this is live. If you're watching this right now, this is a live show. Thank you for commenting. If you got any questions or concerns or comments about how you feel about deportation, I'd love to hear about that as well. So getting back to it, how do we figure out how to bridge that gap? Well, we got to hire different workers during this time, and then we have to operate under different numbers. So even though the deportation thing is a huge problem, losing our migrant workforce is definitely a huge problem. No problem is unsolvable. Every business, no matter what business you're in, is a series of solving problems. Now, you have a choice as a private real estate investor. Your choice could be to navigate these waters on your own, as so many people hop into this market and they go, I'm just going to figure this out on my own. Obviously, I don't recommend that, right? A lot of people, the situation is that they're just dealing with the time that we're in. So we have to ask, regardless, S2 Techno, let's post this. What he said here. We have to ask, regardless of whether we agree or not, what is the reality on the ground? That is so true, right? You have to adapt to what's happening, right? And as a business owner, and when you buy the foreclosure profit system, you're becoming a business owner in this space, okay? So you have to adapt. The reality of the ground is the situation, right? This is it. This is where we are, and this is what we're dealing with, right? And so if you can adapt to that quicker, then you're in a much better spot to deal with that situation in real time. A lot of people facing the situation on their own, also having a day job where they produce an income elsewhere, they sit on these projects for months. And I've seen flips that have taken years because the ability to adapt to the reality of the situation on the ground is very difficult, right? And as Rob has alluded to here, if you wait, you're going to lose. Right? The longer you take to solve these problems, the harder it's going to be to solve these problems, right? So when you invest in the foreclosure profit system, you're getting a team of advisors that has adapted to every situation you think of. I personally have done 400 fix and flips over my career, right? And I've got a team of people who have done several hundred themselves individually. With a combined, we've got about 1,000 flips amongst all of us. So when you look at that number of deals, we've learned to adapt to every situation you can think of twice. So it's so important that you are able to adapt to the times that are in there. And even though we're facing a lot of tough times getting the workers in there, and then we're facing some problems getting the property sold in this much slower market, the net effect right now is that houses are in fact moving. There's a ton of money to be made in this market. And although there's been some issues in 24, when we faced the slowest retail real estate market we had seen in nearly 30 years, and then 25, which is not improved as much as we expected, even under the new presidency, there are still people making money in this market. The key is you have to buy the property right, get through the process quickly, and adapt to the times that are taking place right now. So the deportation thing is absolutely a problem, right? And it's going to be a problem for some time, but there are workers in the market. Unemployment starting to spike up, so there are more people looking for work right now. So you should be able to find slightly less expensive labor than normal. But the bottom line is, if you're going to be a fix and flipper or an investor in any sort of capacity, you've got to learn to adapt to what's happening in the market in real time and be able to navigate around that quickly and effectively. In absence of that, you're going to find yourself losing money on deals, getting stuck into deals, having to turn stuff into rentals. We are dealing with a lot of that right now. My clients in real time are facing the fact that it's not going to sell for what we were hoping for based on the analysis. And I have to own that, right? As the project analyst, I have to look at what the data we looked at 6 months ago or so when we bought these properties compared to what the data is looking like right now. And although the trend was the belief that things were going to start to trend upwards, We did not see that trend upwards, even though there's a quick spike at the early stages of the market in the early part of 25 when Trump was first elected. We saw a spike in the market as we typically do. That has not lasted. He added some tariffs on there, created a great deal of uncertainty in the market, and things are simply not operating the way that we would have expected them to, including this deportation thing, which is throwing a wrench in the works. None of this is to say that it's not a good time to invest. It just means you've got to be smarter about your investment moves than ever and buy the right property in the right market at the right time. I believe that the best time to buy is right now. We have a huge amount of opportunities hitting the market today. The wholesale opportunities that are out there are not getting snapped up in hours like they used to, but rather sitting on the market for some time, allowing for investors just like you to hop into the market in this time frame and get into this without losing money by buying the right deal, being profitable, and being smart about how you hire your crews and get them into this deal. So it's a great time to buy. It's a great time to become an investor. And if you're looking to join up and start doing some real estate investing, please head on out to foreclosureprofitsystem.com. We can have a quick discussion, no pressure. Okay, we're going to go over how this system works, how it could work for you to do your first deal, or if you're adding to your portfolio and want to do multiple deals, you've already done some and we need to add on, and you're willing to buy a deal in the Colorado or Arizona market where I'm operating out of. You are liquid to the tune of $50,000 to $100,000 to buy the deal, and most importantly, you're coachable. You're going to listen to the advice that's given and start doing deals actively in this market. I would love to chat with you about getting started in real estate investing in this very volatile time. We're getting past the deportation thing. We've hired new crews already. We're adapting to that immediately, and we can help you to adapt to whatever the real estate market throws at you so you can be profitable and consistently doing profitable deals in this and any market that comes our way. With that, this is Donnie Corum, your foreclosure deals coach. I want to thank you guys for tuning into the show. We had a lot of viewers today. Thank you so much for being a part. Thank you for those who commented. It was great to hear out there and know that I'm not alone out here yelling into a vacuum. So thankful to have you with the show. Hopefully you'll tune in each and every single week to the show. With that, this is Donnie Corum reminding you again, don't buy a house, buy a deal.